Hello, everyone. Welcome to FiredUp, the podcast for marketers working in early and late stage startups. Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to FiredUp. My name is Morgan McClintock, and today we're going to be talking about, is all publicity good publicity? And so to do that, I am joined by Chris Ulbrich. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hey there.
So this is a topic that has come to our light recently. One of the YC batch companies, a company called Clad Labs with a product called Chad, which for those that haven't seen it is an IDE, an environment where you'll develop software that has embedded in it the ability to look at Twitch or to chat on X or do other brain rot activities whilst you're waiting for the AI to process your instructions. And there was a bit of backlash to this particular company because is this the kind of company that YC should be backing? Is this the future of technology? And clearly this company got some awareness out of the latest batch. There's an article in TechCrunch here that I'm just looking at, but it really did kick off the latest wave of, is all publicity good publicity? So that's the one we thought we'd unpack today.
Right. And this takes place in the larger context of the debate about rage baiting as a marketing tactic, where the most recent sort of popular example of this is Clueless, the company that invited users to cheat on everything. And this was a company that captured a lot of attention with its self-acknowledged sort of rage baiting approach, stirred up a lot of controversy, got funding from A16Z and other prominent investors, and launched really early in its sort of development cycle and managed to secure a lot more attention and backing than it might otherwise have done, given the level of maturity of its product. And not surprisingly, a lot of people in the Valley saw this as a template for success, and backers of early stage startups started to encourage their own portfolio companies to do the same. But now, interesting enough, I don't know if the TechCrunch article that you're looking at is the one I'm thinking of, but TechCrunch had a piece, I think it was out of Disrupt, where they had the CEO of Clueless on, and he seemed to express some reservations or regrets about the way that it all played out. I don't think he explicitly disavowed the marketing tactics, but he did say, I'm not sure that we should have launched as early as we did. The article indicates that they're not really seeing the kind of demand that you would have hoped for given where they are on their launch curve or post-launch curve. And you're left with the impression that if they just had more time to develop before launching this marketing campaign, they might be seeing better results. Now, honestly, who knows if that's true? I think you could argue that Clueless is a fairly undifferentiated product when all said and done, and is up against some pretty formidable competition, and that you could argue that aggressive marketing was their main asset. But that raises the big question: when is negative PR valuable PR, if ever? And is it the same for every type of company at every stage of their life cycle? My instinct is no to all of those questions, but that's what we're here to discuss.
Yeah, I think some of the CEO's misgivings were more about divulging some of their momentum and their revenue numbers early, that they'd seen some early adoption and he's captured attention. Here is this guy dropping out of university, has built a tool to cheat on the entrance exams for all these major organizations, Google and Meta, etc. And, got a lot of coverage with people a bit sort of stupefied and, hey, wait, you'd give up your promising university career to do this cheating app. And he just sort of, tried to turn that attention then into revenue. And I think people tried the app out, and then probably there's been some sort of drop off in adoption there. And so probably sort of got a little bit over his skis in terms of messaging and thinking that momentum would carry on. And, understandable. But I do think the fact that we're even talking about it on this show, this is a small company that has had a disproportionate amount of media interest and awareness, especially in the Valley. And I'm sure they've turned that into recruitment. They've managed to secure one of the top VCs. They've managed to get a product out. It could be a fairly undifferentiated product, but you've at least got people trying it. So I think that template, winning attention, and then somehow turning that attention into some kind of trial or revenue is the model that a lot of the sort of accelerators and VC firms are trying to replicate and to encourage early stage companies. There's no point in having a wonderful product if nobody has heard of you or nobody tries it out. And so having at least sort of getting on the playing field and getting in that attention gives you a shot at doing it. And it's a different set of skills that you'll need to then turn that early attention into ongoing revenue in terms of product stickiness and product market fit and all that good stuff. But at least I think they're all being encouraged now more than ever before, startups, to just come up with something viral or some kind of stunt and put it out there and see if you can get that initial attention. And then you're on the field.
Right. But I think that also reflects the growing awareness, you might even say it's conventional wisdom at this point, that attention is the currency of the modern marketing space. And this is not a completely new observation. I mean, you've heard Google has been described as a sort of attention capturing machine or intention capturing machine. And any model that monetizes eyeballs is going to be attention based on some level. But I think that now there's a recognition that the environment that businesses are operating in, especially early stage startups, is just so fundamentally attention driven. Or at least this is the argument, that it's so fundamentally attention driven that breaking through and grabbing people with short attention spans, so people have more limited attention than ever, and the demands are greater than ever. So you really have to do something to stand out, is the argument. Now the question is, though, we operate at Firebrand in an environment where a lot of our clients are B2B, right?
Yeah.
So the sales cycles are relatively long. Sometimes the procurement processes are involved. There are often a lot of stakeholders, and a lot of our clients are working in highly regulated environments, whether that's banking, other forms of finance, medical technology. Instinctively, as a PR person, my sense is that if you're selling into those markets, you're not doing yourself a favor if you're most famous for a stunt, you know? So I think that there probably is a B2C versus B2B divide here. And of course, you can argue, well, is an IDE a B2B tool or is it a B2C tool? It might be at this point a B2C tool if it aspires to be B2B.
Right.
You know, it wants to make an enterprise sale. But it is something as a marketer that, you know, my faith is that the most successful marketers, even at the earliest stage, are going to be thinking, how am I going to win not just today, but a year from now, 2 years? Am I setting myself up for long-term success, not just the kind of sugar rush you get from attention for the sake of attention? But now the counter argument, what's interesting is that I believe it was Jordy Hayes, the host of TBPN, that Silicon Valley show that everyone's watching these days, is described as Sports Center for Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah.
And he did a whole big post on the Chad IDE controversy and about how this is not really what I don't, compared to Clueless, Chad IDE is not rage baiting in the same way. But I think that the argument was more, the controversy was more, is this what Silicon Valley should be about? Should we be celebrating an achievement that looks so trivial as incorporating brain rot into your IDE? And I believe the CEO for Clad came in and said, whoa, wait a second. I'm actually serious about here. We actually think this is an accelerator. But that's not how it was taken. It was sort of taken as a goof.
Yes. And that's why it went viral for the wrong reason there, really.
Yeah, I mean, almost like electing a dog to parliament or something like that. Or actually, a better example might be, sometimes at the Olympics, the media will celebrate some no hope, like
Eddie the Eagle Edwards, the famous
that's a great
British
example.
downhill skier. Go on.
Right, ski jumper,
Yeah,
wasn't
ski
he?
jumper. Yeah, that's right.
Right, and so Eddie the Eagle gets all this attention, and people say, well, that's not really what the Olympics is about. The Olympics is about celebrating excellence.
Yeah.
And like Eddie the Eagle is a great story, but is it what? And that's the debate. And so there were a lot of founders saying this is the like the cradle of innovation that produced the Macintosh, that produced the CPU as we know it, right? Is this kind of triviality what we should be celebrating? And funding, that's the other thing, right? So that you can imagine there's a fair bit of sort of resentment from founders who feel like they're doing something worthy that isn't getting backing. But what's interesting is in the comments to that post, there were a number of startup CEOs who were saying, hey, look, rage baiting did great for us. Or this kind of viral marketing stunt got us all these meetings that we never otherwise would have had. And so it definitely gave me pause as someone who tends to try to take a longer term view, and as someone who works mostly with B2B companies. So, I think that was part of the genesis of this whole conversation, is that there's not an obvious answer here to my mind.
No, I mean, this example is timely, but the company wasn't intending to be viral. Like, it just was an idea that some people found a bit ridiculous, but has a good intention that, hey, look, flicking between different apps, costs you time. And if you can stay within one, like, I think, wasn't trying to be a stunt, wasn't trying to be controversial. It just happened to be, they hadn't quite thought through all the messaging yet, and it came across in a different way. I would wonder, we don't know what meetings Clad Labs has had. I would say, though, I remember the story, but it was hard to remember the name of the company or even the product just a few days later. You're like, okay, I remember there was the IDE and they did this brain rot thing. And I'm off, like, attention spans in this attention economy are so short that I wonder whether, from a user adoption perspective, whether it has a meaningful impact. Because I've seen a lot of times when companies launch, people sign up, especially if you're going to do a sort of wait list, people will sign up to your wait list. And then when the product launches, they've forgotten that they signed up. Case in point, I downloaded OpenAI's Atlas browser minutes after it came out. And it wasn't until sort of 10 days later over the weekend when I'm like, okay, I'm going to actually use this. And I'd forgotten all about it until that, because you're on to the next thing. And so, I mean, Clueless they did multiple stunts and multiple, they had multiple events, and they did stuff at Tech Week and a party and all this, lots of different things to try and keep top of mind, which is good, right? And they have a natural ability to do that within their organization, which maybe helps them. But I do feel like you get like the product hunt event, product hunt sort of Slashdot kind of impact where everybody comes and then everybody goes, and the locusts have left. And did they actually, were they the right people, and did they actually use your product?
Exactly. Or, famously, do you offer a coupon for a Thanksgiving turkey, and if someone just drops in and gets their Thanksgiving turkey, how likely are they to stick with you?
Yeah.
And this is just an eternal debate in marketing, right? On the one hand, if nobody tries you out, they can't stick. But at the same time, certain kinds of promotion are so self-contained that they don't really lend themselves to stick. And especially, and I think this is where people get really riled up when they see propositions that are nothing but the promotion, right? That they feel like there is nothing to this but vibes. It's the NFT of product offerings, where it's only valuable for the perception and the group perception of it. Like, it's fun to be using it. It's fun to be participating in it. it might actually have some value, but only because there is group attention on it. And once that goes away, someone who's really dedicated to product excellence is going to say, what's left? What do you actually have to offer over the long run? And I wonder to what extent we're having this conversation because so many of the startups that are working their way through the ecosystem right now are riding on top of innovation, LLM innovation, which they don't strictly control, right? So that means that there's a sort of layer of startups on top of this ongoing innovation from companies like Anthropic or OpenAI. And there may be less differentiation among startups right now than in the past, which is going to create even more pressure to differentiate through sort of radical marketing.
Yeah, I think that you've definitely got a lot of competition that's heavily funded, and you might have a finite window in your market to kind of in total for the market, because it might get swallowed up by those frontier models, period. Or you've just got to get ahead, and then there's network effects for the winner, because that's the one we all use. And so you are likely to need to do a stunt. But when it comes to a stunt, number one, I'm really excited that companies are being encouraged to do more stunts in their marketing and to take more risks, because you've got to be bold and stand out. The challenge is getting it right, having something that is really out of the norm and interesting and emotionally engaging with the right target audience and ties to your message, like it's going to attract the people for the right reasons. It's clever, right? That it attracts me for the right reasons, that I'm then gonna stick around, is really hard, because we often come up with ideas when you're like, okay, we could do this. And yeah, that's going to get plenty of attention, but for the wrong reasons or with the wrong audience, or, why is it us and only us that can do, like, trying to actually get those two things right is a real challenge. And if you don't get it right, then, as you said, the audience can tell, and it just feels like empty calories. And people are like, oh, okay, I can see where you're coming from here. And either they will bounce off the stunt because it didn't really work, or it's just it's obviously self-interested, or you're just attracting the wrong audience. And there's no value in that.
Yeah. In a space where there's minimal product differentiation, but the product is authentically valuable, then it makes sense that advertising marketing could be a major deciding factor. And by marketing, I mean the kind of marketing that's more akin, like very awareness-based marketing at the mass level, these days, generally through social media.
Yeah, I wonder though, against that, I wonder whether, let's say you do a stunt and it gets a lot of coverage and it's a success. And so for that window of time, you get a lot of traffic to your website and you can convert it. That coverage is going to be a peak and it's going to then die down. But now we're in the age of AI with LLMs. All those articles are then going to be assimilated into ChatGPT. And if your stunt is not closely tied to what you do, that might be some of the best coverage your company will get, right? And you're sort of warping it, because we talked on a recent show about the impact of AI on messaging, and you have to go through this lens of the LLMs, which is different than before. In social media, it was disintermediation. You can go straight to your audience. Now you're going through ChatGPT, etc., the AI for AI search, and you've just fed it with information it really likes in journalistic sources with stuff about your stunt. So it's going to come up and it better explain what you do, because otherwise you're going to have to then reposition that later. So I wonder whether that factors in.
But that raises a really interesting point, actually, which is that I think a lot of stunts don't leave much of a trace in the journalistic record, because they're not really designed for journalistic consumption. They're not paced in the right way. They're not designed with the sort of formal structure that lend themselves to journalistic coverage. I mean, there might be a press release, but you don't necessarily expect a social media stunt to have a press release associated with it. What that means, though, is that the described a version of this strategy as a kind of sugar rush.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comparison holds up if we consider the role of AI search in all of this, or search in general, but AI search as well, because it will bring you that first rush of users, but there is no value left in it for people for that. If people are searching about your space in an AI, the AI is not going to have any access to
social. Yeah, no, to the social.
Generally speaking, I mean, Grok might actually.
I mean, Reddit, X. Grok's probably got X. Yeah, so it might vary by LLM.
Right, and what are the chances that your stunt's going to leave much of a trace in Reddit? Relatively little, depending on the stunt. But are you going to show up in AI search at all, or are you going to show up in the right way? It's just to say that it's a style of marketing tactic that might be, it's very pointy in the sense that it might accomplish a lot in a very narrow sort of area of marketing, but its effects may be limited in time and in depth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, this Chad story was in TechCrunch, in TBPN, and sort of covered extensively on X. So I would imagine that that's going to be one of the highlights for that company coverage for a while. And so, them and Brainrot are going to be associated.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I mean, this particular one broke through to the media. I'm not actually sure outside of Grok how well it's going to show up in any other AI engine. I think X might very well prohibit other AIs from using their information. But because of the coverage on places like TechCrunch, yes, it will break through. But it's the exception.
Yeah.
And, it's hard to recommend a marketing strategy where you have to be the exception.
Yeah.
You have to be the far outlier to get the value that you want out of it. Now, again, as we've explained here or described, you might get user acquisition. And if that's all you want, and you're not even incredibly worried about retention for whatever reason, then okay, maybe this makes perfect sense. And that would explain why it tends to be used by companies at the earliest stage, where they feel like they have nothing to lose.
You've got nothing to lose, and you've got to get the attention, and then maybe try and correct the record down the line. But there's no point in trying to, if you don't survive to that long, there's no record to correct. So you might as well put it out there, and that's sort of risk it all is a bit of the philosophy that you are seeing. I mean, what about the opposite though, Chris? There are companies like Astronomer, right? Nobody's heard of them. Suddenly everyone's heard of them for the wrong reasons, with their CEO and a crisis that really broke through. And then they did, I think, hats off, a very nice sort of statement with Gwyneth Paltrow to try and sort of turn it around. So they made the best of a bad situation. There's something to do with data ops. I don't know what the impact has been on their ongoing PR or awareness or revenue. But we've all heard of them, and so that's something to build on.
Yeah, I mean, see, great test case. I don't have Astronomer's product sheet right in front of me. I believe it has something to do with data pipelines.
Yeah.
But, if on balance, they can look at that incident 6 months down the road, 1 year down the road, and they can say, that was actually a net positive for us based on where we thought we would be at this time, based on our original marketing plan and where we are. And we're confident that we can attribute the additional business that we got to the awareness from that. Well, that would be an eye-opening finding for people like us, because Astronomer, from what I know of it, does deal in fairly sensitive use cases. They do sell to the kinds of companies that you would expect to be pretty conservative. To your point, they did about as good a job as you can do of saying, we're putting this behind us. Mm-hmm. And so this might be a case of having your cake and eating it too.
Right. The guy that did it or the people involved are no longer with the company. It's got nothing to do with our product, which is super secure and really good. It was obviously some kind of black swan event that happened, but we've handled it and our business is going on. So I'm sure there's a lot of disruption in losing your CEO and head of people, but you got a lot of attention there and you handled it well. I think people respect them for that and onwards. And then within that little competitive pack, this is the one that you've heard of, I guess. And so if you're looking for a product like that and up it comes, you're like, okay, well, let's talk to them and at least sort of hear a few stories about what that moment was like, and you can probably trade on that for a little bit. But I do think in our world, the ongoing building of your reputation and the careful nurturing and correcting of misinformation or misperceptions, that's our stock in trade. And so I think necessarily we think not all publicity is good publicity because we don't have to try and correct it when it's wrong and answer those questions. And so you're actually trying to sort of gradually do it over a long period of time because, you're a security company, you've got to be trusted, for example.
Right. And when I think about the number of clients I've had who were disturbed by a single word in the headline of an otherwise positive article about them. And when I think about how particular many clients in our space can be, it is hard to imagine clients of that sort signing up for a tactic that by its nature is so chaotic as this one. You don't know where this kind of tactic is going to take you. All you know is that it's going to be, if it hits, it's going to be noisy. And if noise is the point, well, okay. But the companies that we work with tend to be so wary of chaos that this kind of approach just doesn't seem to be a great fit.
Yeah. I mean, as you get to become a bigger A, B, C, D round company, you're going to become more conservative with your reputation because you've got more to risk. There's more capital deployed. You've got more customers and more constituents to think about. You've got more staff who need the salary and have got family. Like, you shouldn't be taking big risks for that, and necessarily organizations do. But if you've got a bit of your personality is like, we're a bit playful and sometimes we'll do something that's a bit oddball and you've always done that and people love you for that, then, you can. But if you've always been a historically sort of quiet company and then suddenly you do something really wacky and out there that's off-brand.
Yeah, it does seem like we are converging on this idea that this is really an early stage tactic, nothing to lose kind of tactic. And that might even be intuitive. It occurs to me it might be worth thinking about the most famous sort of marketing stunt oriented campaign ever, which is the Salesforce No Software campaign. It comes up a bit less than it used to, but there was a time when you couldn't even talk with clients about stunts without that campaign coming up. And I don't think anyone would argue that it was incredibly successful for Mark Benioff and Salesforce. So what, if anything, distinguishes that campaign from the kind of campaign we're talking about here?
Well, I do think that fit neatly with their overarching message of CRM should be, software should not be on-premise, it should be in the cloud. And it was shocking that a company would say, don't buy any software, but you're a software company, because they were a representative of that paradigm shift to put things up in the cloud. And so it was more of a marketing campaign than a particular stunt.
No, I mean, just remember the stalking your competitors' events and
being very aggressive and going after your competitors and commenting on what they were doing. And that was part of Mark Benioff's, the founder's style as well. And literally baiting we talked about rage bait, but literally trying to antagonize their competitors so that their competitors would comment about them as this scrappy little startup and confer status upon them in doing so, if I'm Siebel. And that was what they wanted. That was great. And so it was part of a thought through strategy in that sense. And, and that's why it's a great example.
But see, I think that you've put your finger on it, that there was a larger strategy at work. It wasn't attention for the sake of attention. They were trying to shift people's perception of software. And the idea, I mean, it's commonplace now, but the word software is part of SaaS, but it feels wrong to say that you're using SaaS software. I think Salesforce gets the most credit for this. I think software is now so associated with physical media, on-premises technology. I think that the industry distinguishes SaaS from software now. And I have to think that is in large part, if not mostly, because of this campaign. And that was strategically a shift in perception that was incredibly, it might even have been essential for Salesforce's success.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are other examples, though, where publicity manifestly is bad. If you are Juicero, or you were Juicero back in the day, this was a hardware device that consumers could buy and put in their kitchen and make juice out of a pod, a bit like one of those Nespresso coffee machines. And Bloomberg produced an article that said, hey, you can get the juice out of this just by sort of crushing the cup and squeezing it out. You don't need this $400 or $500 juice machine. Okay, this was a while ago, but it's a good example where from that one article, the company went into a complete tailspin and didn't get its next round of funding and is now, a classic example.
A footnote.
Yeah, it's a footnote. But now, more recently, you see Deal and Rippling are having a legal battle, and Deal has tried to steal information from Rippling, and someone's barricaded themselves in the bathroom and all this stuff. I have to imagine that if I am a prospect for Deal, I'm going to ask about this. It's going to it's out there and in the public mind and with prospects. And okay, maybe there's nothing to it, and you get your chance in the sales thing to put your side, but that is not good publicity for that company at this particular time. I mean, it will get litigated and we'll all find out. But in the meantime, I've got to imagine that they'd rather it hadn't happened.
Yeah, it can't be good.
Right. So I do think there are arguments where a company is like, number one, had a bad review and the whole company's gone. And number two, this is just slowing down in this Deal Rippling thing. It's obviously slowing down this business that's a fast-growing successful business, probably slowing it down.
On that note, I mean, is it possible for us to generalize about the kind of publicity that is reliably bad? Why is Astronomer arguable, but the Deal story not?
Good.
I mean, again, intuitively we get it, but if we could sort of intellectually categorize what's going on in each of those cases.
Right. Well, number one, they seem similar in the, hey, culturally at Astronomer and culturally at Deal, at the highest level, these things are sort of acceptable, right? And they are happening, and this was for the Astronomer thing was at the highest level in the company, at the board level. So, what that speaks to the whole culture of the company, and maybe the Deal Rippling thing speaks to the whole culture of the company. I have no insights into this. So there's a similarity there.
Well, but I think you've actually put your finger on it, that with Astronomer, there is a sense that ultimately this is a company with strong adult supervision. Even if, some shenanigans ensued, they were promptly and appropriately addressed. And like you, I'm not into all the details with Deal, but there is a sort of a family team. I think it's like a father-son team in the high executive roles. And if they are not being checked by the board, then yeah, that sends a message that the management may not be fully trustworthy.
Right. I mean, one of the golden rules of crisis management is that you've got to sort of disproportionately respond. And in Astronomer's instance, the CEO and the head of people are gone. And clearly, whatever that issue, however much it was, is not going to happen again. And so if you're a customer of them, it's not going to happen again. If you're a prospect or a customer of Deal, and, it looks like there's this sort of stealing of information from a competitor, how do you correct that? They haven't done anything to manifestly correct that and draw a line under it. So it's sort of always going to be on the back of your mind. And so I think that's the difference between those two cases.
And, In full transparency, we should note that we've been using Deal as an example here, and Rippling is a former client of ours, not during the time any of this was taking place or when any of this publicity was coming out, but just for the sake of transparency to note.
A great point. Listen, so I do think that this is an important and timely topic. We do think that we're in an attention economy. The attention spans are super short. You do need to win that battle. And so for early stage companies, they're very much under pressure to get out there and do something that can kind of grab your attention so that they can eventually convert that into revenue. It's a real challenge coming up with an interesting way to do that is sort of, productive, but that's a marketing challenge. And I'm excited that people are willing to do that, because the risk of not doing it and just being sort of largely anonymous and ignored and on the sidelines is also, let's be clear, a risk. Because for startups, a lot of these markets we talked about are winner takes all. There's a network effect, and you've got to get ahead. And so you're being pushed to do it.
And at the same time, I think the history suggests, and the examples we've talked about suggest, that the stunt or the viral marketing is going to be most effective when it connects to some larger strategic plan, when it advances your messaging, when it's not attention solely for the sake of attention. I think we have established that there are times when attention for the sake of attention makes sense because it's do or die. It's an existential, question. But when the companies that are legendary for this kind of thing have a bigger plan at work, and so, when formulating your own marketing plan, I think that's worth keeping in mind.
Great stuff. All right, Chris, thanks for your time talking through this. I really enjoyed that. It's a challenging one, and no doubt we'll revisit this. And thank you all for listening. If you found that useful, please drop us a comment or follow us in all the usual places. And we look forward to seeing you all this time again next week.